right, here it is, the Week 4 MVP ladder from Sekou Smith on NBA.com.
A lot of losses on that list.
Here's the Week 1, really.
Here's the caveat.
lot of L's
I'm
on that
coming to
list.
your defense here.
Thank you, man.
This is the caveat. This was published, posted on Friday?
Last Friday, yeah.
Friday. So this is going to change.
Yes. And it was the
Friday.
first one.
So in
it was
other
our
words,
first
it's a
one.
volatile
one.
list.
It's a very volatile list.
Okay.
And
Fluid.
At
I like
this
it. We
point
like
in the
these words.
season, you've got teams jumping up and down. A win or loss here can knock you from third to eighth or vice versa.
Sure.
So the MVP, which is so much about winning in the eyes of most voters, this list is going to change a ton.
Yeah, and
so defend yourself.
well, and the list is also about spectacular performances. So, if you go out and you're a guy that's having a season for the ages, like Russell Westbrook did last year when he won his first of, who knows how many MVPs potentially, it was about his team being good and his season being one that we hadn't seen in forever. There's a narrative that comes along with it. But when we get into the grime of a season, you have to weigh so many different things. It's not just best player on the best team all the time. It's not always that cut and dry. A lot of it is how well is a guy playing under a certain circumstance, which team is hot that week, and it changes. Basically 4 or 5 games can be played in between updates on the MVP ladder. So one of the things that we look at, and it's myself and several other editors here, at NBA.com.
Spreading the blame, are you?
No, I'm saying the people that I talk to and kind of, beat up about
some other people involved. It's
not just me, folks.
It's just me on the hook on Twitter when people want to scream. And yes, I did. Kristaps Porzingis, all your friends around the globe, I heard them. It was till Friday. Things are fluid.
Here's a question for you. Generally, when it comes to the MVP, how do you define MVP and who the candidates are?
Well, that's a great question because there's never really been a rock solid definition of that. But to me, it's always been who's the player that's having the most undeniably great season. And you say, well, what if he's doing it on a team that's horrible? Well, then he's not, his impact is not undeniably great. I mean, you're talking about guys who can elevate the other players around them and put his team in a position to play at that next level. And I think that's where, through the course of a season, we start weeding out guys who just don't fit in that profile. So it's always a guy who's having that next level season. To me, that's the guy who wins the MVP every year.
The definition I came up with for myself is the player most responsible for his team's very successful season. So it's kind of nebulous.
It's gotta be,
It's purposely
sounds
open-ended,
good.
but I have an idea. But I know what that means.
Good.
I know what that means in my head when I'm thinking about it. So who is that guy right now?
I think Kyrie Irving's been the MVP thus far. And, you could look at it just statistically, and James Harden statistically has been better, but, sometimes your team's not built to get 115 a night. It's about the impact within the system you play that determines those wins. And to me, Kyrie Irving, when you factor in what happened to the start of the season, losing Gordon Hayward and losing him the way they did, then following up that first loss with another one, they won 9 straight. How clutch he's been down the stretch of a lot of these games. He's validating and showing people. We all knew how great he was. I think it's giving people a different look at him, much like we saw with Russell Westbrook once Kevin Durant left. And so that's why right now I give him the edge. James Harden's right there. And it's, this is not going to stand. I mean, hell, next week it may change next week. But James Harden has also been phenomenally terrific when you factor in Chris Paul basically hasn't played this season. And in that game, he was able, that they lost Chris Paul, he was able to bring him back to a huge win on the road against the defending champs. And so he's been terrific all season, as he's been literally since he put on a Houston Rockets uniform. Those are the 2 guys that, to me, are kind of head and shoulders above everybody else, simply because their teams are head and shoulders, and those are the 2 guys responsible. Golden State's been terrific, but they got 2 guys who are MVPs on that roster and 2 other guys that could be in the conversation. So different scenario with them. Houston and Boston, one guy really has had tremendous influence over their overall success.
This could be the year that Harden finally wins it after 2 runner-up finishes, but I'm with G.A. I think Kyrie Irving is the MVP right now here on November 8th.
Yeah, I mean, and they're the team, they're the hottest team in the league if you're looking at record. And Kyrie, for the record, will climb between now and Friday.
Oh, he's
So
climbing.
you're saying
Oh.
he's going to be on that ground?
I'm just
You're giving us a
sprinkling
little
that out
tease,
there,
a
just a little crumb.
teaser.
But I will tell you this: it's about context too, and nobody discussed Russell Westbrook in an MVP conversation while he was playing with Kevin Durant. Think about it now.
Right.
He was one of the things is if you have multiple elite players on a team, which obviously many teams in this league are loaded up, how do you make a case for a guy to be the MVP of the league if he might not be the MVP of his own team?
Right.
So that's one of the dilemmas we've had
Sure.
over the years, just, as MVP voters even.
How do you differentiate?
How do you,
Yeah.
you look at the standings, Houston and Golden State have the same record. So is James Harden's context just better than Steph's and KD's because of the circumstance?
Right.
Or is he having a better season? I think all those things get weighed in these conversations, and that's why I think the season is the best way to vet an MVP. Last year, Russell Westbrook won that MVP on the strength of the way he finished with the triple-doubles because he and James Harden were basically in a two-man race all the way down the stretch to see who would win it.
Yep.
Harden has a great case. Twice he came up short in MVP competitions, really by virtue of nothing that he did wrong,
Right.
but by other guys just having better or just as good, a narrative to win that award. And it is. A lot of it is the narrative. I say that all the time. Last year, I maintained the minute Kevin Durant decided to go to Golden State, I said, you might as well put Russell Westbrook high on your MVP list going into that season. I had no idea he was going to average a triple-double. I didn't know he'd do all that. But I knew that he would be in that conversation based on the context of KD leaving, it being his show and his alone, and would he rise to the occasion and play as well as he did, which he absolutely did that.
I always find it fascinating, the whole discussion, because everybody's criteria are a little different. And I told you what mine is, more or less.
I don't remember
how
it,
do you,
but I
it's
do
okay.
remember you telling me.
You got the idea, though. I'm not asking you to quote it. Well, how do you view an MVP? To you, what is the MVP of the league?
Well, listen, I think you have to, first of all, to be an MVP, you have to play on a good team. I think first and foremost. And that good team is basically good because of you, relative to where they rank with the rest of the league, right? And I think in Westbrook's case, the fact that they were firmly entrenched in the postseason on that roster where there was nobody else that would have even sniffed an all-star game. There was nobody else that had really proven to be a guy that you could count, basically count on to be a factor night in and night out. And so he willed that team to the levels that he got him to. So that set him aside in a lot of ways. But again, it's not always for me about the stats as much as it is about the impact. And I think that's where I look at it. And again, why are you good? Listen, it hurts Golden State now having KD and Curry there because there's no way, I don't think that either of them gets it. We were having this conversation before we came on. I said, well, if the Celtics end up with the 1 seed and they're like a clear 1 seed, they won 56, 57, 58 minimum, I think he's going to win the MVP.
I think you're right.
If Harden and the Rockets end up with the 1 seed, I think Harden would win the MVP. I do think, well, if they both do, then we'd have a really interesting conversation. I mean, seriously, I do think that's something like that has to transpire to where people get on board for those guys. Listen, Giannis and Porzingis, those are two guys that in Porzingis' case, they're also winning. They won 6 out of 7, the Knicks, so, and he has been monstrous.
Well, look, if the Knicks finish like 4th in the East or whatever, then he's going to be in that conversation because he'll have driven that. Yeah, no, that's absolutely part of it.
But there are a lot of ifs, that involve this early conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Like, we get the same situation every year. LeBron is like the Spurs of the MVP conversation. We take him for granted every year.
Yeah.
He puts up MVP
5
numbers all the time, and he gets dinged for being so reliable. Like, we don't always give him the credit I think he deserves in the MVP conversation for being as great as he is. It's not that he did something wrong. It's just that we've grown accustomed to him doing it. So therefore, you overlook it when there are guys who haven't been as great having these spectacular seasons.
I thought he had a great season last year. I thought they, as a team, underachieved a little bit in the Eastern Conference, and he paid the price for it. And he's part of that.
Yeah.
He's driving the bus there.
And he's got 4 of them.
And he's got 4 of them.
I mean, I know he wants at least one.
Look at that content. Like, you got 4. You
know what? He's got to show us that.
Yeah.
You'll see at least 2 MVPs. LeBron, Of course, Russell Westbrook, and who knows, maybe an MVP to be in James Harden. Thursday night on TNT, Cavs and Rockets from Houston at 8 Eastern time. Then it's the Thunder in Denver. Nikola Jokic coming off a 41-point game.
Put him on the ladder.
Coverage starts at 7:30 Eastern time with Game Time.